get called by many names.
Okay. We'll go ahead and call the Senate Revenue Committee to order. Welcome to Senate Revenue. The first bill up for our consideration will be House Bill 100 Engrossed Acquisition Value Study, sponsored by Representative Jennings. A good friend, Representative Jennings, why don't you come up and explain this good little bill?
This is a bill that basically is we don't know what we don't know. And so this bill is the second attempt at that. There are a lot of people that have different ideas about this topic, about acquisition. And so I've talked to a lot of constituents who really like it, who moved from that western state here. And one of the few things that western state did that the citizens liked was acquisition. But knowing that Wyoming is not California, this is an attempt to have a study that would give us a lot of those things that might keep us from making some pitfalls and some errors that happened on the West Coast. And so we got this committee amendment that took care of the financial aspect of that, took it to 50,000 because they would still have to put it out for bid. They have one company that had basically said around 38,000. And if this was done in collaboration with the county assessors and the Department of Revenue, I think they're going to come up and visit a little bit. Starting on 17, it talks about what these questions, and the DOR and the assessors got together to decide what things they would want to know from a study. And so you'll see starting on page 2 all the way through page 3 are the questions that they would be answering, and on to page 4. There was an amendment on page 4 that they thought that was too prescriptive to say shall, so they moved it to may. The other amendment that was made was on page 2, they pulled lines 10 through 13. They thought that was too prescriptive. And while the shall that you'll find later shall create legislation, I would agree that we shouldn't tell the committee what to do there. I would, if you're inclined and you discuss this bill on 10 to 13, I would like to see you guys discuss putting it back with the 2% inflationary, or the cap part of that. 2 or 3% is what's done. I think it's 3% perhaps in California. There's a couple other states that have done a cap of 2 to 3%. And I don't know what that would look like in Wyoming, but I think that might not hurt to have the people that would conduct this study look at that also. So with that, I'd stand for any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Jennings. Any questions? Senator French.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Jennings, a couple of things. So how would they determine the acquisition value? Just in my own case, we built a house almost 50 years ago now, and then we sold it recently and built a new house, and we built that 7 years ago. So how are they going to determine this acquisition value on a new house? It was 7 years ago value that I built it, or current assessed value? Would you help me out on that a little bit, please?
Representative Jennings.
Mr. Chairman, Senator French, so that's part of what the study would tell us. There's a number of ways that you would look at that. The cost of building. There is, in that, there was a look back to 17. And the reason that I picked 17, but it wouldn't need to be 17. It could be, the assessors go back 6 years. And so I didn't want to go back and create more hardships for them. But we've had a 2 to 3 year period now of hyperinflation. And so like in your case, it would go back, or what we would want the study to do is to go back and pick a date or look at those dates, say 17, 18, maybe even 19, prior to the hyperinflation. When California did this, they went back 15 years. They had a look back, and they grabbed those valuations at 15 years back. And so if there was new property, I don't know what their particular law states. Did they only look at construction costs? I don't know. And that is what the study is about. So there would be a look back, is what I would ask for the study to do. Probably not 15 years, probably more like, 4 years or something, to get us back past what was it like before this hyperinflation.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now I'm just a little more confused than I was.
I'm
at the
sorry.
Start. No, you did well. You did well. So if they want to go back to 2017 or whatever, then what about those folks that prior to that, to set a value? How are you going to set a value on somebody that maybe, I use the term elderly cautiously anymore, but somebody that's been in a house 50 years, 60 years, long time? How are they going to set that value that they bought a house, built a house in the 60s or 70s, never moved? How would this study tie that in? Thank you.
Representative Jennings?
Mr. Chairman, Senator French, so one of the things that I wanted the study to do is to go back and make it revenue neutral, so that we weren't having huge problems in our funding streams to, say, schools, for instance. So say you built your house 7 years ago or 50 years ago, it would not go back to the construction cost back there or the acquisition cost back there. It would go back to a time just prior to hyperinflation, and whatever they were paying in taxes at that point. That's one of the things that the study would tell us, is that, say they went back to 2018 values. So in your case, in 2018, whatever you were paying for taxes, it would not go back beyond that. That would be your starting point.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Ide?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Jennings, thanks for bringing this bill. We need a lot of reform in property taxes, and I've learned my short time here that there's not a big appetite for that, and it's disappointing, to say the least. This study, do you think that this study helps move the needle on trying to get legislation passed here? Is that I assume that's a lot of the intent of this, is to get something solid. Everybody can see that we got, we did our due diligence, this stuff works, and just a few comments on that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ides, that's precisely what I'm after here. I don't know that acquisitions, that there would be problems. We're not California. And so the attempt here is that everything that we see through the legislature this time is a Band-Aid. There is not a single piece of reform except this piece of legislation that I'm aware of. And this isn't reform. This is to do our due diligence to see what it would look like to actually make reform. And so that is the attempt. We can't make good decisions if we don't have good information.
Thank you. Any further questions for Representative Jennings before we let him go? All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, committee.
Brenda, anybody from the agency want to testify? Welcome to Revenue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Brian Judkins. I am the administrator of the Property Tax Division for the Department of Revenue. A couple things I wanted to go over is we did reach out to a few consulting companies for this study. After I got the request to do the fiscal note, I reached out, and one consulting company is ready to conduct this study. He stands willing and ready. Kind of briefly, the study will encompass from the administration of acquisition all the way to a revenue impact to the state. So the study will be very encompassing of the acquisition value. Not necessarily similar to what Proposition 13 and the state out west, but I think the bill does give the option of the consulting company to do 3 different studies or 3 different types of acquisition value. So, Mr. Chairman, what Senator French had mentioned earlier about new construction, I think the study will cover that, but that is a concern of definitely, the original language said if the value will go back to 2017, what do we do with new construction? And I think that consulting company will definitely address that in the study. And again, if it was retroactive of the study to go back to previous years, we're going to look at value, not taxes, if that makes sense. With that, I would stand for any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Judkins? I have one. I'm assuming they're going to look at any constitutional changes that may need to be done or statutorial references, that the whole thing to be given to us as a committee that we can look at. I'm assuming that'll be conceived in this study.
Mr. Chairman, you are correct.
Okay.
Yes, because definitely the Constitution will need to be looked at for this.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you. Any further questions? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Representative?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tony Locke, representative from House District 35. Just going to be brief, speaking quite honestly, largely on behalf of many of my constituents. A lot of people, I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know, a lot of people looking for reform in some fashion. Many people very familiar at some level with this concept of acquisition. I realize there's lots of complexities and those kinds of things, but I'm largely speaking on their behalf, saying, hey, they're looking for us to bring something forward, at least take a look. So I'm here strongly in favor of the study. Let's go find out, will this work? Will this not work? If there are major pitfalls, we need to understand what they are. And if it'll work, hey, maybe it will provide us some reform that does help our folks. So thank you.
Any questions for Representative Locke? Thank you, Representative. Any other representatives or Representative Burkhart? No? Okay. Any other public comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ken Gill, Laramie County Assessor. The assessors did meet on this proposal, and we were in support of a study for it. During the interim, there was a lot of work done between legislators, the Joint Committee, the Department of Revenue, the assessors, all getting together, getting on the same page, getting all the questions into this bill. So Senator French, your questions are great. They were some of the same exact questions we had. And hopefully the study will show us if this valuation process is good or if it's something that won't work for Wyoming. So with that, I would stand for any questions.
Thank you, sir. Any questions? Thank you. Any further public comment? Any further public comment? Judy, do we have anybody on Zoom? Nobody on Zoom. Okay, public comment is closed. Committee, what's your pleasure? Move to pass, seconded by Ide. Any discussion on the bill? Any discussion? I think it's a good little bill. I think it's, our constituents have been clamoring for this, and it's important. I think this is a good step. Make sure that we do this thoughtfully. Question being called. Judy, will you call the roll?
Senator French,
Aye.
Senator Ide,
Aye.
Senator McEwen,
Aye.
Senator Pappas,
Aye.
Chairman Biteman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, there are 5 ayes on House Bill 100 engrossed.
All right. House Bill 100 has passed the Senate Revenue Committee. Who wants to take that one on the floor? I'm sure it'll be up today.
I can do
Oh, we do have a Senate co-sponsor. Okay, Senator Hutchings is on there. Okay. Okay, next House bill up for our consideration today is House Bill 213, sponsored by Representative Burkhart. Welcome to Revenue, Representative Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. May I proceed?
You may proceed.
Thank you. So, members of the committee, what this bill does is gives a property tax exemption for a specific reason. Currently, we have companies producing energy and they're buying equipment, bringing into the state, and that is stored for a period of time before it's actually put in use. And what happens is they pay sales tax in a county, they start paying property tax in that county, but they ultimately install it in a second county that has gotten no sales tax, no property tax. They could just as easily have stored it in another state, which meant no tax at all for Wyoming. What this bill does, and the bill kind of, I guess I can put it, it says what it means what it says. It's in the property tax exemption statutes. And I've worked this with both the County Commissioners Association and the Department of Revenue. And it's extremely similar to a bill that passed out of the legislature 2 years ago or 3 that was vetoed on the very last day due to a lack of understanding. So what the bill says is that property temporarily stored in the state before first installation of the property is energy production equipment in this state. If the Wyoming sales or use tax is paid on the property in the county where it is to be installed at the rate imposed by the county, it doesn't have to pay the property tax. And it then goes on to define what the assessors need to do, what is energy production equipment, what isn't, and that's the bill in a nutshell. I use for an example, electric transformers. Right now, if you can buy a transformer, you buy it. You don't say, well, it's not quite what I need. You can always trade it with someone else, but you buy it because transformers are out almost a year to 2 years in order. So you buy it, you bring it into Wyoming and you store it. It's not an inventory, but you hold it as your own. And that what this says is if you pay that sales tax, then you don't have to pay the property tax until it's installed, and you have to pay the sales tax in the county in which it is installed. If you don't, you want to pay the sales tax where it's delivered, then you pay the property tax too. So I think both the counties and the businesses win with it. Gives them a little bit of a tax break for a while, but at the same time, lets the money go to the county in which it's ultimately installed, because that's what our rules say. You pay sales and use tax where it's put to final use. That's the bill in a nutshell, Mr. Chairman, committee, and I'd be glad to answer questions.
Thank you, Representative. Senator Pappas has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Burkhart, I see this, it's just, the bill is just specifically for the energy production segment of our economy, or of our, it's just for energy production equipment. Are there other users out there that would benefit from this if it was more broadly companies that are not energy production, but may have the same issue, storage and not put in production, not put in use until a later time. Just wondering if you've looked at that.
Representative?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Senator Pappas, Mr. Chairman, I think there are other companies that might. This was narrowly defined to follow the previous bill. I would imagine, say, a construction company may bring in construction equipment. Right now, if you can find bricks, for example, you may want to bring them in and store them for future projects. I kept it narrow so that we don't confuse the issue. And energy production equipment is a very broad term. It would be the transformers I mentioned, separators on oil and gas fields, wind turbines, the blades, any of that. And this seems to be where the majority of issues come in, is in the energy production, mainly wind industry, where they deliver the blades, the turbines, the nacelles, the towers individually. They're stored up for, some of them have been stored for years. And the counties have come back and said, gee, we'd like to get our money from this. So that's the reason. But I imagine there are others that would benefit, but I crafted it very, very narrowly to match the previous bill.
Follow up?
Oh, thank you. And I know it's, certainly if you look at the bill title, there's, we couldn't ever change it to add anything right now. But would that also include energy distribution folks, or co-ops, or utilities, or? It wouldn't, obviously, here, but I can see where maybe they would also benefit. But again, I understand that this now can't be changed for anybody else other than energy production. So just wanted to, I guess, bring that to light.
Wouldn't you agree, Representative?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Pappas, yes, I would agree.
Okay.
But that's an opportunity for the future.
Good bill idea for someone else, right? Any further questions? Any further questions? Thank you, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee, and I'll just wait for questions.
Yeah,
whatever you might
stick
have.
around just in case. Department of Revenue? Welcome, Director Henson.
Good afternoon, Chairman Beitman, members of the committee, Brenda Henson, Director of the Department of Revenue. For a one-page bill, there's a lot of information here to absorb, as my comments today will be specific to the administration of what is noted in the language. First and foremost, the title of the bill stating energy production inventory exemption. I wanted to point out that in the House, there was discussion related to the term inventory. And in Title 39, 11101A Romanet 9, inventory is defined. And the short version of that is inventory is property that is held for resale. And that was not applicable in this situation in the legal sense. This is equipment parts that are owned by a company, but they're certainly not held for resale. So while it isn't removed from the title of the bill, it is removed from the body of the bill. But I wanted to make sure that the committee understood that. One of the challenges we have related to this bill is we are discussing a property tax, which is Title 13. Or excuse me, Chapter 13 in Title 39. And then we have a sentence that is related to sales and use tax, which all of our sales and use tax statutes are in Chapters 15 and 16. So stepping back from an administrative perspective and reading the bill, if the focus is intended to exempt equipment prior to the first installation for property tax purposes. If that is the intent, then I would suggest that we strike the language related to the sales and use tax. And the reason I say that is the way we collect as far as where and when sales tax becomes due and where it's distributed to is all covered in Title 15 and 16. So again, if the focus is on the property tax exemption, I think the bill, in my reading of the bill, it basically will exempt energy equipment, not including those items from line 12 on to the end of the bill, but energy equipment that is purchased by a company, brought into Wyoming and stored until it's actually installed that first time. Now, it does not limit, in this bill, it doesn't limit it as to where it's installed. It's just an open statement. It's temporarily stored until first installed. I did want to make sure the committee understood that we have a lot of what we call an appraisal and taxation construction work in progress that is currently on the tax rolls, that it's our understanding based on this bill that that would be then exempted from property taxation. Right now, it's taxed for property taxes wherever it exists on that January 1 assessment date. This bill would exempt that from property taxation. When we talk about the sales and use tax, we have numerous publications at the Department of Revenue that help to provide a company with that navigation of when is sales tax payable. For example, if a purchaser purchases equipment in another state, and we have an agreement with that state, as long as the amount of sales tax that's paid in that other state is of the same rate or higher than the Wyoming sales tax that would be owed when it is brought into Wyoming, there is no sales tax owed. That's just one of the intricacies that we've got related to putting a requirement for sales and use tax in property taxation statutes. I will say that if there is a if there is an interest in changing how we distribute sales and use tax in the state of Wyoming, we stand ready at the Department of Revenue. That's a conversation we'd be happy to investigate more. I think that to pick out one sector of industry and treat them different than other sectors of industry related to when and where sales tax is owed and where it's distributed, that is troublesome. But I think that broader discussion would benefit this committee. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd happy to answer any questions related to this piece of legislation.
We'll start at the end and work our way this way. Senator Ide.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The question, you just mentioned something that if they paid a sales tax, if it was equal or higher in another state, we wouldn't have to mess with them. What happens? Are there any states that are lower? And how do we treat that if the sales tax is lower in another state? Do we hit them for that difference if they bring that equipment here? Thank you,
Ms.
Mr.
Hanson.
Chair.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ide, that would be in the form of a use tax, and it would be the difference that we would anticipate them paying, correct?
Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm assuming if they paid more, we don't give them a rebate though, correct? My real question is, what is inventory not for resale? I'm hung up on the definition of inventory because I believe just by the definition itself, it implies resale. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Director Hinson.
Mr. Chairman, Senator McEwen, if I stated it wrong, I apologize. Our definition is inventory is personal property held for resale. What I'm saying is this specific bill is not geared towards personal property held for resale, even though the title of the bill uses the word inventory. And so that's why they removed the word inventory in the House, so that we weren't in conflict.
Follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you. I'm not always the sharpest tool in the shed, as you know. I was I'm still kind of lost on the inventory word, but I think you just answered it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank
So,
you.
Mr. Chairman, in other states, Senator, inventory is taxable. The inventory on the grocery shelf, the inventory in the bicycle shop. Basically, on a certain date, that inventory is reported and there are property taxes owed on it. In Wyoming, inventory is exempt for property taxation, and inventory is defined in 3911 as personal property held for resale. And so that's where that language really is used the most, is that exemption for inventory held for resale.
Thank you, Director. Any questions? Senator Pappas.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. In the, in 3911-105 exemption, we're saying that the following property is exempt from taxation. And if you look on page 2, that very first sentence, basically lines 1 through 5, would you suggest then that the second half of that sentence from the comma on, if Wyoming sales or use tax is paid on the property of the county where it will be installed, the rate imposed by the county should just be stricken?
Director Henson.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Pappas, because there are other guidelines in chapters 15 and 16, that would be the cleanest piece for me. If it's not stricken, at minimum, to possibly amend it to where it just requires that the sales or use tax be paid on the property in order to qualify for the exemption. The sourcing of where that sales tax is due and where it's distributed is really in 15 and 16. And I'm hesitant to have a property tax statute change how we administer sales and use tax in general.
Thank you. Yes, I agree.
Okay. I'll follow up on that. So as the bill is currently written in this engrossed form, without any amendments, is this something that you can implement as written?
Mr. Chairman, it will be difficult in that I will have conflicting statutory language in 15 and 16 that is contrary to what this bill says for this exemption.
Okay. Committee, any other questions for Director Henson at the moment? Yeah, Senator Ide.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, the most of the conversation around this has been, as you know, energy production equipment, and that's where the trouble lies on separating that out from other businesses that may not fit into that category. Can you give some examples of, you know, what other businesses and how broad that could potentially be? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Director Henson.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ide, historically, I've appraised numerous industrial properties, refineries, public utilities. In almost every instance, we see where companies have equipment, parts that they keep on hand, as was testified earlier, in the case of where they need to repair something. Or we also have construction work in progress, where you have the parts and the materials are all delivered, but that project may take 1-2 years to complete, to actually install all of that equipment. So construction work in progress, specifically now with department assessed companies, almost every industrial company has construction work in progress on the books that we appraise today. That will be eliminated under this legislation, because this bill says as long as it's temporarily stored in this state prior to first install, it could be exempt from taxation.
Committee, any more questions? All right, thank you, Director.
Thank you,
We
Mr. Chairman.
appreciate your testimony. Any other public comment on House Bill 213? Come on up.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Jeremiah Riemann here on behalf of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. Do support this bill and ask for your favorable consideration. As the sponsor mentioned, this concept has gone through a bit of a tortured pathway through the years. There is a major change here from previous iterations, and that's intentional. And if I can just give a classic scenario, we see a lot of energy equipment brought into Natrona County as an example, although this is a real case. And that's great. We want to see that production equipment come in. In fact, early iterations of this bill were designed to try and incentivize that development of those laydown yards in Natrona County and perhaps other places in the state. The issue with the previous versions is that you would receive the exemption if you paid sales and use tax in the location where it was stored. So that means that Natrona County gets all of the benefit, yet Carbon County might be the place that the wind towers, for example, are going to be installed, and they'll have the impact, but no sales and use tax. And so the iteration that changes here is to ensure that you have a situation where Natrona County benefits by the economic development of the laydown yard, but Carbon County also benefits by getting the sales and use tax. If you strike the language that's been suggested, that would take that out and essentially provide that sales and use tax could happen anywhere in the state of Wyoming, which may be an intention that we want to go down, and it solves the issue, but it kind of takes away from what we're trying to accomplish with spreading out the benefit of this energy equipment coming into the state of Wyoming. So I do think that perhaps we need to continue to work on that, and I've been working with the department on that, but would certainly appreciate that we find a way to perhaps keep that language for now and continue to work this over the next few days. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd stand for any questions, but we are supportive.
Thank you. Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Riemann. Well, if that language is taken out, it doesn't mean that sales and use taxes won't be paid. I mean, they're still going to be payable, right? Under other sections of the statute, not in the property tax section.
Mr. Riemann.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Pappas, the way I would interpret it is that the only way you could receive this exemption is if you actually paid that sales and use tax in Wyoming, if you take that language out. If you keep that language in, then that sales and use tax has to be paid where you ultimately intend to install it.
Follow up, Mr. Senator Pappas? No? Any further questions for Mr. Riemann? County Commissioners? No? Thank you, sir. Ms. Harpstreet.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Ashley Harpstreet. I'm the Executive Director for Wyoming Taxpayers Association. I'll keep this short and sweet. As you heard from our testimony earlier during the session, just like Senate File 110, personal property exemption, we absolutely support House Bill 213, energy production inventory exemption, as this is a step to cleaning up our personal property taxes. We feel this exemption is justified as taxes on tangible personal property create high compliance costs, administration costs, and can distort capital purchasing decisions, which ultimately increase the cost of the end products for consumers. Regardless of the dollar figure that the fiscal note represents, the benefit is a tax system devoid of pyramiding and costly administrative costs to individuals, businesses, and governments. The property will eventually be taxed again when it is installed. It is equitable as the exemption is eliminating the tax and applicable to all currently being taxed. We feel it's stable as the benefits could outweigh the loss of revenue by the economic gains of retaining and recruiting these large taxpayers to Wyoming. It is a de minimis amount for the time the property is being stored before installation. Finally, the exemption is transparent, accountable, and auditable. It eliminates the taxpayer's administrative burden in addition to the government cost to administer the tax. It does sound like there's some issues on the collection of the sales tax, but as far as the exemption of the property tax, we're 100% in support.
Thank you, Ms. Harpstreet. Any questions? Committee? Thank you. Anybody else wish to testify on House Bill 213? There's none in the room. Judy, do we have anybody on Zoom? Nobody's on Zoom today. All right, public comment is closed, or actually, Representative Burkhart, do you want to bring us home on this? Did you hear anything in there that needs to be clarified? What say you on the page 2, line 3 and 4, where we're talking about if sales tax or use tax is paid on the property in the county where it will be installed? What do you say about that?
Mr. Chairman, thank you, committee. I don't really understand why you can't link them. If you go down to lines 5 and 6 and 7, it says that the county assessors and the department can put whatever they need in place to do this. And I think it's real easy. A piece of paper that says, hey, the sales tax has been paid is all the assessor needs to then know that they can't charge property tax until it's actually installed. I don't understand that. As for the scenarios, I can come up with one whereby, let's just pick a wind turbine company. Is domicile here in, and I don't want to use the company name, domicile here in Wyoming. They have all their turbines, blades, and everything delivered to them in Kansas. They leave them set there. They become their property. They bring them to Wyoming and then claim, we already own them. We're just bringing our own personal property with us. This gives companies an incentive to bring their materials in and have it delivered in Wyoming, have the taxes paid here instead of another state. It gives them a little bit of a break that they can use when they need it. For example, my example of transformers. Right now, you take delivery wherever you can get them, and they're going to get way more expensive. This gives them an opportunity to bring the things here to Wyoming. We get that initial tax on the sales and use tax. We get the property tax when they're installed rather than them bringing them in from another state saying, I already paid the taxes. So that's one thing. I don't understand, I guess, that you can't link these that say the sales tax was paid. And that, I mean, people buy automobiles in one county and have them licensed in another and pay the sales and use tax for that automobile in another county. There's some people who have a very low license plate number and have done that for years, who've lived in, frankly, Carbon County, but they had a very low number in Sheridan. And they wanted to keep that number, so they pay everything to Sheridan. This tends to avoid that with large industrial projects where you're dealing with a lot more tax money than you would with an automobile. When you have $1 million tied up in a wind turbine and you're delivering 30 or 40 of them at a time, that makes a substantial impact on the various counties. And the state gets the money. Wyoming comes in here rather than going to Kansas or Texas or some other state. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee.
Thank you, Representative. I appreciate the clarification. And I would ask, so these companies would be paying the sales tax or use tax in the county where they are going to plan to install this, correct? That's what this contemplates.
Mr. Chairman, committee, yes, that is correct. So if it was delivered here in Laramie County and they're going to stall it over the line in Albany, they would pay the tax in Albany County. To me, the tax would be paid. There's a note that goes to the county assessor that says the tax was paid, they qualify for this exemption.
Okay.
And maybe I see things, simplistically, but a single sheet of paper that says that, I don't see where that's a major issue.
Okay. Thank you. Senator Ide has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Burkhart, how does I'm just curious how it gets policed as far as something that's sitting temporary in a yard and, you know, as they bought it in Colorado or Oklahoma and it's sitting there. Who does the oversight and try to figure out how all that works before it goes to being permanent? Thank you.
Representative?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ide, I would say it's the county assessor and their job to go and inspect for property. I mean, I think I get a statement every year saying, here's your property tax based on our review of your property. Same with industrial property. They have someone go and inspect. And they could do the same here. But if it's already been paid, there's no, and they meet this qualification, there's no reason for anybody to go inspect it until it is installed. And then they'd go out and look at it and say, yeah, you have a new separator sitting here.
All right. Any further questions? Okay.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you,
Chairman,
Representative
Committee.
Burkhart. All right, that closes public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure? I'll move the bill then. Discussion on the bill? Yeah, I'll take one. But I don't, yeah, some do, some don't. We're pretty loose on it, but. No discussion? Yeah, Senator Wright.
Yeah,
Turn your microphone on real quick.
The testimony from Ashley, it's a good start to moving forward to like personal property tax. I like that comment. The only part that I guess I'm having questions about is just sort of what Director Henson brought up, targeting or how to, you know, how to divide that out of construction and work kind of stuff. And I think it's a good bill, but there's some questions on just the energy part of the exemption. Anyway, that's my comments. Oops.
Any further comment? Any amendments? All right, Judy, will you call the roll, please?
Senator French,
Aye.
Senator Ide,
Aye.
Senator McEwen,
Aye.
Senator Pappas.
Aye.
Chairman Bateman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, there are 5 ayes on House Bill 213 engrossed.
Okay. House Bill 213 has passed the Senate Revenue, and you don't have a Senate co-sponsor. Do you have anybody in mind to carry this for you on the Senate side?
Mr. Chairman, I would rely on the goodwill of the committee.
Okay, we'll take care of you, Representative. Thank you. Okay, last bill up for our consideration today is House Bill 229, electronic payment of sales and use taxes, sponsored by Representative Larson. I sent him a text message saying he was up next, so he's probably making his way down here. He's in committee at the moment, I believe. So we will sit tight for about 5 minutes maybe and wait for the bringer of the bill. And if he doesn't show up, we'll just do it ourselves. All right. Senate revenue will be back in order, and we have the good bill sponsor, Representative Larson, to talk us through House Bill 229. Welcome to Senate Revenue, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So today I bring before you House Bill 229. It's an act relating to sales and use taxes. Basically just allowing county treasurers to collect sales tax and use tax online, as well as be able to submit their tax returns, their monthly tax returns to the Department of Revenue. And you can see that in the bill. It's a lot of duplicate language within the sales and use tax statutes. So on page 2, the department may provide an option for the return to be submitted and for any taxes to be remitted electronically. That is referring to the Department of Revenue. On page 4, this is where it deals with the county. And it says the county treasurer may allow the taxes to be paid electronically after the amount of sales tax has been determined by the county treasurer. The county treasurer may charge a fee necessary to recoup transaction fees incurred due to electronic payments. Both of those sets of language are duplicated in the use tax statute, and I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Pretty complicated bill there, Representative. Any questions? Representative Larson. Questions? So this currently cannot be done at the moment? That's why we need this bill, I'm assuming?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct.
Okay. And which types of taxes these are all sales and use taxes you're assuming, or you're contemplating being collected, not specifically any particulars?
Mr. Chairman, the idea generated from collecting sales tax on a vehicle, but the way this is written, it would apply to all.
Okay, good to know. Senator McEwen.
So are we gonna model the version the state uses to collect sales and use tax? And is this kind of really aimed at just kind of vehicle transfers and a few things like that? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure as far as the modeling goes as far as the state collects it, how the state collects it. I think that'll be up to the counties to make that determination on how they see that works for them. But yeah, that was the original intent, was for vehicles, but I think I could see it working for any sort of collection of sales tax. So.
Okay. Committee, any more questions for the bringer of the bill? All right, hang tight in case we have some follow-up questions at the end, please. Department of Revenue, anybody want to chime in on this? Welcome back to Revenue. Mr. Fanning?
Hello, Chairman Whiteman, Senators. I'm Krista Urick. I'm the Administrator of the Administrative Services Division. We handle all of the collections of the sales and use taxes.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Brett Fanning, Excise Tax Administrator at the Wyoming Department of Revenue. So together, I think that Christy and I can answer any questions you may have. So Mr. Chairman, there's really two parts to this bill. And so the first part is the department may provide an option to file returns electronically. And that's the first part, and that's going to be the bulk of my testimony. And then the second part of it relates to how county treasurers collect sales tax payments with their motor vehicles. So Mr. Chairman, if I could, I'd really like to focus on kind of this first part, and then I'll briefly touch on that second part. Thank you. Okay, so the first part, an electronic option to file taxes, the Department of Revenue actually already has this. So say, for example, you're a grocery store operator and it comes time at the end of the month to file your sales tax returns. What you likely do is you go online to our portal and you submit your sales tax, and then that sends an electronic return to my department. The vast majority of our returns work that way. That being said, I know exactly where the first part of this bill came from. That option is not available for our county treasurers to submit sales tax to us on their motor vehicles. So we actually send them manually a hard copy return and then say, hey, send this tax into us. And we do accept the payment electronically. That is something that Christie's group does, but that's a hard copy return. And so that's the distinction here, because I do hear a lot of feedback. I think it's probably a top three most thing that I hear from the county treasurers. Why can't I do this electronically? And so that's really where the first part of this bill, we do offer the vast majority of our returns electronically, but it's this county treasurer return that we can't. And so that's where this fiscal note came in. And Mr. Chairman, the second part of this bill, and so on page 8, section 2, the House did appropriate some money. We worked with our IT contractor to get some funding available. They appropriated it so we could actually program this into our system. So that's really the first part of this bill. The second part of the bill, it's important to note that the county treasurers and my staff, along with Christie, we have almost daily contact with them. We really do. It's this partnership. We're an administrative agency as far as taxability. Christie has tax distributions to them monthly. So there really is this partnership. And so when this was in the House, they updated the language of this second portion. And it was the amount of sales tax after the amount of sales tax has been determined by your county treasurer. This is important because when you go in, say you buy a new motor vehicle, you go into the county treasurer and you say, hey, I need to get my plates, I need to pay my sales tax. Those bills of sales are complicated. And this is coming from the excise tax administrator. So you've got this motor vehicle, which is sales taxable, but then you've got a variety of other line items on that invoice. Some are taxable, some aren't. And so it's complicated, and it takes staff at the county treasurer's office, and you'll probably likely hear testimony to this as well, where they've got to determine the amount of sales tax that you owe. And so that was really kind of the adding this language after it's been determined. If the county treasurers have any questions, they call our office. My group helps walk them through some of those taxability questions. So then the second part of this is the county treasurer may charge a fee to recoup any transaction fees to accept electronic payments. And so that was put in, I believe it was a recommendation from appropriations and from other committees to let's get them to be able to recoup some of the costs. So with that, Mr. Chairman, the department is ready to stand for any questions you may have.
Great, thank you. Senator McEwen has a question for you.
As we go through this, I'm a little confused. Are we proposing a system for the counties to report to the state on their return? Or is this a system for me when I buy a car to pay my sales tax online? So as I look at it, I believe it's probably only doable from the counties up, and I'd like your opinion on that. Thank you.
Mr. Fanning?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, outstanding point. It's the two parts of this bill. So the first part is to allow the county treasurers to submit electronic returns to us. So when you go into your local county treasurer and you buy a new motor vehicle, they're collecting sales tax from you. And so then at the end of the month, they've got to send in their return just like any vendor would at the end of the month. So if you have a retail store, they submit returns to us just like maybe a grocery store does at the end of the month for those returns. So that's the first part of this bill, is that just that programming to allow the county treasurers to submit returns just like a normal vendor would. The second part of this return, or the second part of this bill is a little, this is where I haven't worked out the logistics in my mind as well. And the reason I say that is because some county treasurers do allow some electronic payment. So you go in there, they tell you you just bought a new vehicle and they tell you you owe tax. Then how are they going to collect the tax from you and I when we purchase that motor vehicle? That's the second part of this bill. And the county treasurers may be here to testify to that portion of it. So the first part is to get the sales tax money from the counties to the department. And then the second part of this bill is how they collect it from you and I when we purchase a new motor vehicle.
Good explanation. Thank you, sir. Any further questions? Okay, Ms. Urick, do you have anything to add, or you just here for backup, just in case Mr. Fanning screws up on us?
Just to be here to basically, serve our division that does most of the collections of the taxes.
Well, we appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Let's hear from the county commissioners. You don't have anything that you're supportive? Okay. Treasurers, or anybody from the Treasurers Association here? I don't see anybody. Oh, you do? Oh. We have a question for the bringer of the bill from Mr. McEwen, if you don't mind, Representative Larson, jumping back in the hot seat. Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I buy this new car, right? I go to my county courthouse and I give them the MSO or the paperwork, and they work up my sales tax and everything on it. My question is, until I paid that sales tax, I believe, I'm not sure, a title will not be issued. A title, a clear title, or a title with a lien or anything. So I can't get title, so that I can't, in my case where I live, go across the hall and show them my paperwork and get plates. So I'm wondering, where does this become an advantage to pay it online when I already have to be there? I love the part with the county sending it up, but as an individual, I'm wondering if it provides me, what service, or if any, does it provide me? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the way I envisioned this working out in my head is you could call the county treasurer or email the county treasurer's office your bill of sale from the dealership, and then they're able to send you a link where you can pay, or maybe they set up the county has enough money to set up a system that says, okay, we've authorized sales tax on this vehicle, and you can go in and enter your last name and your zip code or whatever and pull it up and pay it. That's kind of how I envisioned it in my head. But as far as the title goes, that wasn't included in this bill, and it definitely hasn't been addressed with this specific bill. So.
Okay, to answer your question.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Thank you, Representative Larson. Anybody on Zoom, Judy? Nobody on Zoom today. Well, they're missing out. Oh, you have an amendment? Oh, okay. Sure, yeah, sit down and walk us through this amendment. I'm sorry, I didn't see that sitting here. We have a lot of paperwork here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this was an idea that was brought to me by another representative, just to put some sideboards on the fee that the county treasurers are allowed to charge. So they're not charging 10, 20%. I don't think they would, but it just puts a cap at 3%. That's usually standard for people who do charge fees for charging the card on your card. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions for Representative Larson? Senator Ide.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This appropriation that's listed in here for $228,000, is that, what does that get you essentially? It's a short question. Thank you, Senator.
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Chairman, Mr. Chairman. So that just covers the expansion of the online portal for treasurers to submit to the Department of Revenue. That has nothing to do with an individual going to the county treasurer. So none of this money is going to the treasurers. It's all going directly to the Department of Revenue. That answers your question.
Senator McEwen.
So if I'm an individual and I'm gonna pay this online, the IT ferry's gonna cover the cost of me getting to your portal? I think there's gotta be costs on the individual end too, doesn't there? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure I understand your question. Could you maybe rephrase it?
Rephrase your question, please. Senator Pappas.
There has to be a system for the individual to pay the tax. And you said that's not included in the 228,000. And I'm wondering how we pay for the system that the individual uses. Is that clear? Okay. thank you.
Representative. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, that I think that would be up to the county treasurers to make that determination on it, how they want that set up. Keep in mind that this is a may collect fees electronically. So the county treasurers do not have to do this at all. So if they don't have the funds or whatever in their IT budget to do it, and they don't feel like it's important for their office, they don't have to do that.
Thank you. Senator Pappas, did you want to make a comment or a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Typically, that the appropriation would go to expand the software that the department needs to change their system to get it from the counties. I would imagine that every county can take credit card payments right now, so they've probably already got the system and they don't need any change, other than they need to be reimbursed the 3% for the cost of taking credit cards. So I don't think it's an issue for the counties. I think they've got that system, but it is an issue for the Department of Revenue because they have to upgrade their whole software system. We see this a lot when we change it with Secretary of State, with everybody else. There's always software changes that need to be done. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Pappas. Okay. Thank you, Representative. Appreciate the clarification. Committee, what's your pleasure? Moved by Senator Pappas. Second by French. Want to dispose of this proposed amendment? Amendment's been moved. I'll second. Discussion on the amendment. Pretty straightforward. Puts a cap on that processing fee of up to 3%. Any discussion on the amendment? Discussion, seeing none, call for the question. All those in favor of adopting the proposed amendment to House Bill 229, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Amendment's been adopted.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question?
Yes, Judy,
On
you
the
probably don't
amendments?
have an amendment, do you?
Oh, I do,
Oh,
yes,
okay.
I do, but you only discussed the page 4, line 5. I mean, that was one that was brought up. So what about the other 3 lines, the other page 4, page 7, and page 7? Did you vote on the whole amendment? Is one of the
Yes,
questions.
ma'am, we took it as one
Whole amendment.
whole amendment.
I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Wow, that feedback is bad. The feedback. We're not gonna have any dogs within a 2-mile radius around here. Okay. Phew, back on the bill, gentlemen. Any discussion on the bill? Any further amendments? Question being called. Judy, will you please call the roll?
Senator French,
Aye.
Senator Ide. Senator McEwen.
Aye.
Senator Pappas. Chairman Biteman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, there are 5 ayes on the amended House Bill 229 engrossed.
Thank you. House Bill 229 is passed Senate Revenue as amended. Looks like I'm a co-sponsor, so I'll go ahead and I'll carry this one on the floor. That clears the desk. Thank you, everybody. This meeting is adjourned.